Welcome to the Rabia and Sana show. We're two desi girls reinventing cultural norms with love to make difficult conversations easier to help you take courageous steps faster.
Whether you feel like a misfit now or have been breaking the standards, this podcast is for you, for the adults, the young. Come as you be and become your authentic self as you desire. Let's go reinvent some cultural norms together.
Hello everyone, I am Rabia Paracha. I have been a rebel without a cause for most of my life until I discovered my purpose to empower women to empower themselves. And that led me down a rabbit hole to become a life coach from CTI Coactive Coaching. And today I'm a mind and life power coach who helps people break free of their limiting cultural beliefs to find the life they love and the love of their life.
Hello everyone, I am Sana. I am from New Jersey, a Pakistani American. Professionally, I work in the clinical research field. And personally, I have always had this purpose of empowering women of South Asian culture to be able to live the life that they want to live and be true to themselves instead of what the culture expects them to be. And so here I am pursuing that purpose, and I am also studying to become a life coach. Let's get started.
Hello, amazing souls. Welcome to season 2 finale episode of the Rabia and Sana show, the podcast where we reinvent cultural norms to elevate your emotional, mental, and relationship well-being. I'm Rabia Paracha.
And I'm Sana Shah. This episode is a special one. We are wrapping up season 2, and to switch up things today, Rabia and I will have a candid conversation about our takeaways from all of the episodes that we have had this season in this special season finale.
Wow. This season was so amazing. We had 9 episodes and all catering to how to reinvent cultural norms with incredible experts and such wise guests. Like, it was just phenomenal and it whizzed by.
Completely. And, Rabia, I am truly grateful myself to be in this experience where we get to sit and speak with our guests that were on for the season. I feel like from every single episode, I myself learned a lot. We had Dr. Flora, we had Dr. Nancy on that dating episode. We had Fauzi Zamir about the financial stress-free. We had Michelle, Ria Kapoor, Dr. Sujata, and Sandra. And so I'm just so excited for you and I to go deeper in some of the things that we talked about in these episodes.
I know. And every conversation had so much depth, so much information.
Yeah.
And each and every one was so great. And you and I also dove into a few sensitive topics that are really touchy in the desi culture. We talked about self-care, a big taboo, and inclusion. How do we make each other feel included in everything we do? Those were our conversations that you and I had. So tell me, was there an episode that stood out for you personally more than any other episode?
Yeah. So, you know what, Rabia, I was thinking as we were preparing a little bit for this episode, that what stood out to me in our season. And I feel like so many of the things that we talked about really have this underlying message. A lot of them have the same underlying message, but we talked about it in different ways. And so that underlying message that stood out for me. And I feel like, and you always say this too, that wherever you are in your life, wherever you're at that point in your life, that will resonate more to you at that time. It will feel more closer to you, to whatever the topic is at that point. So I feel like our first episode that we talked about, which was self-care is not selfish, that really resonated for me. And I think we really dove deep into that message in a few of our episodes. Right? Like making the choices that you want to make for your own self, for your own mind, and for your own capability to have the ability to discern that these are the choices you want to make, whether you are in the state of dating, or in sex, or in grief, how you want to portray your grief and handle your grief, and how you are in your decisions of pursuing a second child, and you are don't have the ability to do so. These type of decisions and these type of things that we end up doing in our life, when we really go deep in and really see that we are being true to ourselves, that for me is self-care and not selfish. So I really like that message of ours in that first episode, where we just started with it, and then we kind of talked about it in different ways in some of our other episodes. What was it for you that really stood out?
You know what? You've got a great point about that string, that theme, because we're all about reinventing cultural norms. And then we pick up topics that address the different issues within that umbrella. And so for me, I really loved Fozzie's episode, actually. What did we call it?
Kiss your financial stress goodbye.
Yes, yes, that one. These are the things that we were talking about in our episode. Like, we
Yeah.
don't talk about finances. We portray a certain image to uphold our culture, our pride and ego. And we don't ask for help. We don't make the changes when we need to make them. We wait too long and we make the problem bigger. Now, in that episode, we're talking about finances, but that is a pattern of how we address all issues. There's that famous saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually referring to the pattern of how we address our problems versus how we tackle the problem itself. So those were the key factors for me that really stood out. If I was to say pick one, that would be the one. But also Dr. Nancy's was really cool.
So I think with the message of our podcast about reinventing cultural norms, the message from Fozzie's episode with finances and our changing the mentality of our desi mindset with that. And it goes along with, my original thought with self-care is not selfish, in that you are looking out for yourself and not worrying about what the people will say, how we are showing up in society. And so this mindset of in our culture, is so deeply rooted in of what will the people say, and this shows up in each of these topics. I feel like how we need to have a second child. We need to have more than one kid. It's not normal for a family to have one kid. And why aren't you pursuing fertility treatment? Like, this is your given right. You should have more kids. Your child deserves a second kid. So these type of things coming up in our society, changing that dial from thinking what we owe to society. We owe to society that our grief period is going to be this much. What, like Michelle really went into, how we decide what our grief path is, what our grief journey is. And it doesn't have to be the same as anyone else's. Everyone else's is different.
Right.
And so the message for me, which really felt good to me, was that reinventing the cultural norms that is in our culture for each of these things.
Right. And when you were talking about grief, now this is just back to that point that we interpret things in different ways. We might hear the exact same thing, and our interpretation might be very different.
Yeah.
And so you were talking about grief just now, right? And each of us has our own way of grieving. And so how I took that was that whatever I experience organically and naturally, that's my grieving process. I'm not in control of the grieving process. The grieving process unfolds naturally, and it doesn't have to be linear. The stages of grief that Michelle described, like, you can be angry one day, negotiating another day, and isolating another day, right? So you can be going through all these phases. And for our listeners right now and our viewers right now, as we shared earlier, we're just touching on some key points that we took from our episodes that we recorded. But what we want you to do is go and check out each of these episodes. We had 9 episodes this season. Go back and listen to each and every one and see where you are right now and where the information that's provided lands with you. Because be it grief or financial, debt and financial issues, be it dating and sex issues, or whatever the issue, or maybe you don't have an issue and you just want to grow. So, all of these things are so important for us to
Yeah.
remind ourselves of these topics, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, each of the episodes and each of our guests gave some really great advice, and they gave like examples of tips and tools that we can use for each of these specific topics. And so, for our listeners, wherever you are, each episode that you will listen to is going to give you these insights on what to do, how to do it. And so, going back to that grief one that you were speaking about, Rabia, Michelle also talked about being there for someone else who is in grief, what to do when you are in the presence of a friend who is grieving. And for me, that was really important because I find myself not knowing what to say, how to show that I'm there, not without invading the grieving space, and so that was really, really helpful for me how she went into that. Um, and so there's other really great tips on our holding space for ourselves and being there for ourselves in the grieving process. And we know how much of a taboo this is in our culture, and nobody talks about these things. We don't even know when we are grieving that we need to go through that grieving period.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that even though we specifically talked about grieving after the loss of a loved one, we did touch on that there's so many different types of grief as well. I'm just switching the dial now to the episode with Dr. Nancy. And
yes.
after a breakup, you're
Mhm.
dating someone and after a breakup. So I'm tying these two, the grief and the dating together. You feel a loss. And
Completely.
that same grieving cycle that you would have experienced with the loss of a loved one when you lose a partner, not to death, but to a breakup, you also go through that cycle. And this was brand new to me when I learned about grief, that I was allowed to be sad after a divorce, even though I may have chosen to leave the marriage, right? Especially in our culture, it was, oh, you're the one who left. Why are you so sad?
Mhm.
Like you brought up, that it has its stages and it has its process and flow, but it's not linear. So I really like that with the dating episode with Dr. Nancy Lee. I thought that, how we address our dating and romance, like how we perceive it and how we experience it, and then how we have this neurochemistry that has a role in everything we do. And there's an acronym that Dr. Nancy used, but I can't remember it.
Please go check out that
Yes,
episode and listen to the acronym that she
yes,
used. You said it was EPI something, maybe
yes.
for
The whole word is really
yeah.
hard for me to say, but the same thing is that, there's an acronym to help us remember, but it's been a while and I'm getting old. Hey, listen, I'm okay with aging. Our
Reinventing
culture,
cultural norms right there,
yes,
Rabia.
owning where you are. There's no shame in aging. It's a
Completely.
natural process.
Yes.
For me, that was really, really good.
Yeah.
I love her book. Don't
Yeah.
sleep with him yet.
I haven't read it yet, but it's definitely on my list to read, and I will. And I do want to do in season 3, go a little bit more deeper into this topic, Rabia, and really look at it a little bit with the desi perspective and the desi lens, because you know how it is in our culture where, especially to women, sex and dating tips are not talked about at all. It's like a lot of the times we're married and it's like, there you go, figure it out. You don't talk about it at all. And so there was a lot of things I learned from everything that Dr. Nancy said. but I really feel like this is a message that we need to dive deeper into to talk about with our female listeners, the Desi girls, for them to learn and for them to be able to self-care in that area, and not feel like they're being selfish for
Oh,
saying no.
right. And I think that with dating, I think one of the points that Dr. Nancy also discussed is we've evolved so much, right? Times have
Mm,
changed so much. And when it comes to our culture, even though times have changed, people don't change with the times.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so we're trying to do things the old fashioned way, things like our parents would have done or people before us have done, but they don't work the same way. And there is nothing wrong with getting to know your partner,
yeah.
how you do it, how you choose to do it,
It's such
because
a shameful topic, though. It's like comes out as, don't talk about it. It's going to be very shameful. And it's hard for me to even talk about it, right? It's very controversial. But I
right.
feel like it's important to separate the shame from the learning.
Yes, and sort of an offshoot. One thing that I think you and I should cover when it comes to dating and relationships is interfaith marriages and interfaith relationships. So a TED talk that I did watch last night was with Reza Aslan, and he's a religion scholar. So I'm listening to a lot of things to understand and gain perspective. And I was watching one of the nightly news shows about the current world situation, and I was curious about people. And then I found a TED talk on him, and the TED talk was about how he met his wife. So he was Muslim,
Yeah.
converted to Christianity, converted back to Islam,
Yeah.
and he married a Christian. And they were talking about how they're going to raise their children. And the number of interfaith marriages today compared to 20, 30 years ago has skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So it's a very important topic for us to touch on, because in our culture, these tangents are now available to us, having interfaith relationships or how to raise your kids after that interfaith relationship. So we should
Yeah.
definitely delve into that as well.
I'd love to. I can't wait for it. It's going to be a very controversial and, topic that has a lot of bias around.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
Sana, I just pulled up Apple Podcast here, the season's episode. So I'm just going
Right.
to shoot out an episode name, the ones that we haven't touched on yet. And
Okay.
I want to ask you just what do you remember from it, and what would you like our audience to make a note of from your perspective? I was thinking about Rhea Kapoor's episode, and that was a Misfit's journey, authenticity unmasked. So, what do you remember, or what is something that stands out for you from that episode?
Oh, I loved that one too. So Misfit is something that I completely resonate with because, that's what our podcast is for, the misfits. And I just loved how she said towards the end, misfits are not actually misfits. You are meant to shine. You are meant to stand out. You are not somebody who doesn't belong. We all belong.
Mhm.
Some are different because we are questioning the standards. We are questioning our belonging to that standard. That doesn't mean we don't belong in the community or we don't belong as human beings, but we are meant to stand out in order to show others the light as well. So I really, really love that. One message is something that vividly stands out in my mind from that episode.
Mhm. I would have said the same thing.
Yeah.
That's really important. And, I've always said as well that we weren't made to fit in. We we want that fitting in part is having a feeling of belonging,
Mm.
that inclusivity, like we talked about on our inclusion episode, right? We want to feel included, but we also want to maintain our our originality, our authenticity, and be able to say what we think and feel without being questioned or gaslighted, or without
Yeah.
being, just demonized for thinking a certain way.
And the one more point I want to add to this particular point is that it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have friends who you relate to, or you have family that you relate to. It could just be finding any type of support or community that you resonate with. Like for me, when I felt like a misfit, I actually felt like I didn't belong. Like somehow I'm an alien that doesn't belong in the rest of my culture. But then when I went out and I seeked, support, and when I seeked like-minded people, I found you and I found many other people in the same community, and I started to feel like I belong. And it doesn't really have to be with even physical face-to-face type of community, right? It could be listening to a podcast like this one where you resonate, which would make you feel like you actually belong and you're meant to shine.
For sure. In terms of relating, two people may not relate to each other, but they don't have to isolate or alienate each other. When we're made to feel that you're different, you're not like us, we're different, right? Or you're weird, like all these, I don't get you. Whatever you talk about is so weird or so out there that I don't get it. So belonging is actually how you make a person feel. Relating is understands what you're going through. Like you and I had that, the young age marriages, and we did things differently. And then the consequences of our decisions or the decisions that were made for us and the challenges we had to leave the marriage. So that sort of gave us that relatability.
I understand. But I think most of the time what happens is that the people you relate with end up making you feel like you belong.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. They don't judge you anymore. They don't
Yeah.
alienate you anymore because they get it.
Mm.
They get it. There is a distinction that you can feel belonging without the relatability. But when you have that relatability, then definitely there's a bond that you naturally form because you just have the sense that she gets me.
That's a learning point in order to make others feel like they belong, even if you don't relate.
Yes. And that's how we can actually practice peace in this world.
Yeah. It could resolve so many conflicts that are happening right now all over the world, to not feel like you're separated, you don't need to relate. It's fine. Just don't make them feel like they don't belong,
Is there anything else that's coming to you?
Yes. So, the International Women's Day episode that you and I had done, and the topic for Women's Day this year was inspiring inclusion. And I think a lot of the points that we talked about in that episode, Dr. Sujata and Sandra also covered in their episode, which was activating success.
Mhm.
I feel like the topic inspiring inclusion, it's the understanding of this is also another thing which goes hand in hand with what you're saying about the relatedness and differences of each other, and inspiring this in others, no matter women or men. I know it was Women's Day topic, but that's what I feel like many people are not striving towards, inspiring this part in each other and spreading it. And this is one of the reasons why we are doing our peace vigil, which is in September. And so I feel like what we talked about at that time, times were different in the world. The world has a lot of social things have happened, political things have happened in the world right now. And I feel like we need to go deeper into this topic of inclusion.
Yes.
And it will go into all of the things that you have mentioned as well with belonging.
And what you said right now is what made me remember that we might be different is to find a common ground. Civility is so important, to begin from a place where we say, oh, you're human and I'm human. You heard and I heard. So beginning with equality and equity, which is you matter and I matter. And then talking about the differences, right? Because if we don't have this feeling of inclusion, that we have an inclusion leads to belonging. Even though we're different, we all hurt, we all have our traumas to deal with. We're woven from the same fiber. We're just raised in different environments that have taken over our humanity. And it makes us insensitive, it makes us, sometimes cruel, and it absolutely perpetuates mediocrity. And mediocrity is something that we need to have a show on, because I've taken courses and they talk about being extraordinary, like live the extraordinary and be the extraordinary. To be extraordinary, the opposite of extraordinary isn't ordinary, it's mediocrity, right?
Mhm.
So, what are you making acceptable and justifying that's mediocre in your life?
Mhm.
Right? Because gaslighting and stonewalling and all these behaviors, they're very common. Passive aggressive behaviors, they're common, and they're also accepted, but they're also mediocre.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we really need to go deeper into this topic as well. And Dr. Sujata touched on this as well in talking about in their upcoming book, Activate Success. She talked about women raising other women. And that's also part of the inclusion where we are open to doing that. And that will lead to individual success as well as success as a community, as coming together. And so there's this billboard near my house when I go places, I always see it. It says, mediocrity ends here. And I feel like it's speaking to me because it was, as I started in my learning experience of mental health, and I didn't even pay attention to this billboard before. And now I see it and then I think deeply about it and I'm like, yes, that's what it is. We need to elevate. We need to get over these type of things. And we need to get over not including, not being inclusive and actually not being like, how long is this DEI and all of these movements that are going on have been going on, right? But there is no substantial change.
You know what? It takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes consistency, and it takes falling back, and it takes getting back up and continuing. It really requires us all not to give up.
Yeah.
And when we keep persisting and we keep moving forward, I'm remembering now Ria's episode about mindset and repetitive, actions, repetitive thoughts. Like we've got to train ourselves, and a little bit into what Dr. Sajata has also talked about. Like it is a reprogramming of a sort. It is a readaptation, and again, I think all these things that we talked about and what you touched on at the very beginning is that this is all part and parcel of our values. As I'm getting older, I'm realizing how important it is for me to live into my values. And the more I live into my values, the happier I feel. The more I'm separated from my values, the less happy I feel. And sometimes to feel happy, you may not have belonging. You may have to stand alone. But then when you stand alone, we're also magnets, and like attracts like. At some point, you'll connect with that person that relates to you or accepts you for who you are and how you are. But
Yeah.
we hold on to things, and then we want the people in our lives, the people that are making us feel different or excluded or alienated, like a misfit. We hold on to them, we cling to them, and we want them to change.
Yeah. I really feel what you said about being true to yourself, true to your values, and you may need to stand alone in that. And that's so hard to do. And I think that is so important, though. But you're right. It is like we are like magnets, and who truly we relate to will show up. But there may be a time where you need to stand alone. But being true to yourself, true to your values is the most important thing. And I think the caveat to that is knowing your values, right? Because then we come to a point where we don't even know our values. And that's where the work comes in. That's where getting to know yourself, getting really listening and getting therapy or finding a coach or listening to podcasts and doing all of this work. And to that point, I want to add that I feel like today's culture is so moving away from doing work, from putting in the time and realizing this ability of persistence and slow changes, slow, small steps towards an improvements. With the culture of Amazon 1 day shipping, right? Or like a magic pill, which is going to quickly fix you. I talk to some of my friends sometimes and I'm like, you have to do this and you have to do this and slowly this will happen. And they're like, can I just take a pill, which will, transform me magically? No, you cannot take a pill, because I think if you were to take a pill and if you were to have some sort of a solution that would fix it all in a day, it would not have the same meaning as much as it does when you actually put in the work and you realize it's not small improvements. It may be coming back as well sometimes.
No, and you're so right. For me, what worked, a couple of small things that changed the trajectory of how I saw the work I was doing. So yes, it's effort. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it requires discipline. But let me tell you, the sooner, or as and when I started realizing transparency is important to me, so I want to be open and honest with my family, with my kids. And when I started becoming honest with my family, they may not like what I say. They may not like who I am, but they see my truest, most authentic, most real. So they don't think, oh, she's a liar. Because in the past, I would lie about the things that I'm no longer lying about. So there is an issue both ways. You lie to honor your family, or you tell the truth and you take the heat.
Consequences.
Both have consequences. But I think when you realize that what you're doing, and when we lean into our values, when I leaned into my values, what I found was when I was true to myself, it was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It was worth it because what it gave me was I began to trust myself. We don't trust ourselves. We don't believe in the process. And when, it takes, as you heard from me millions of times now, it takes 42 days to 254 days, I believe, to change a habit. Now, if you want to change a habit, find the value that's really important for you to change that habit. Because when you're connected with yourself, that change will become easier. But if you're doing it just to lose weight or just to look good, just for a superficial, to make someone happy, it won't stick. You will fall off and you will be on a yo-yo diet. You'll have different relapses. Not saying that there aren't relapses when we're connected to ourselves, because we're constantly living between these different paradigms.
Yeah.
It's not linear. Nothing is straightforward.
Yeah.
But coming back to why you're doing it, which value is really important to you, it's easier to get back on and stay in it.
Yeah. It's like chasing that dopamine hit that you get from getting these little small wins and constantly chasing those, not realizing you're attached to that dopamine hit. That's what you are actually attached to. And
Right.
so that feeling of fulfillment should always be there internally, and you can still enjoy the things. You can still enjoy the humanly things, the worldly things, but not get attached to them for
Yes,
that dopamine hit, right? Is that what you're saying?
absolutely. And you can create a new dopamine hit. When you are disciplined and you honor your values, congratulate yourself. Your brain doesn't know the difference between an external happiness or an internal happiness. It's what you think about most, right? Like our most predominant thoughts becomes our reality. So if we start saying, oh, I'm living into my values, I'm living into my values, I'm living into my values, I love living into my values, there's a dopamine hit there. And then when you say, I did it, I disciplined myself, I went to the gym, I'm so proud of myself. When you start doing that, that's also a dopamine hit.
Yeah. I feel like, Rabia, that dopamine hit that you're talking about by being disciplined, being true to your values, that's a different type of a hit. It's like it feels way better than what you would feel when you buy the car.
You feel empowerment. And what did you feel?
So I feel like I am just starting to feel it now because I'm in that journey. And you know my journey very close, where I am, disciplining my habits and actually really taking charge of my habits and my lifestyle. And I have done this before a few times, and it was years ago. I haven't done it in like 10, 15 years. But at that time, the why was different. The why was, I want to look good, so I'm going to be really strict on my diet. I want to, I have to make more money, and so I need to study more, or I need to get a promotion. And actually, when I did get the promotion, it didn't feel that good because I wasn't doing it for the right purposes. And so now that I'm in this journey of really disciplining myself, it just feels so natural and so right. And it feels like I'm not forcing myself at all. And it's not hard. Also, like, it was hard a little bit in the beginning when I was trying to get into the habit of it. But now that I'm there, it's more like I want to. It's not like I have to force myself to do it, or I have to be like, oh man, I have to really eat this now. I have to really be true to my diet, and I have to really make sure that I go to my lessons. I'm learning swimming and going to my swimming lessons on time and practicing. It's because I really enjoy persisting, you
And
know?
you are connected to your values. When I start coaching, I sent you a form and you write down everything, right? Anything that you write down has a 46% higher chance of happening. So we have that ability to write down things. Just, to our audience right now, write down 3 things that you want to happen in your life, and then find a value that is really important to you, connected to that value, and then persist. I mean, that's a simplified form. If you want it to happen faster, getting support and getting the that guidance makes things happen faster because they keep you on track. We fall off and then we don't get back on. We fall off for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then next thing you know, we're completely off.
And also read it daily, right? If you write it down, read it
Absolutely.
over and over again. The importance of work and effort.
And cultural norms are things that have been within us since the day we were born. Then intergenerational things come forward. They're reinforced. And it's hard to break free of cultural traditions and norms. And when you don't have the support, it is difficult. But I will repeat this again, it's a worth it journey. It's not an easy journey. And trust yourself and believe that if 10 people before you did this and they saw results, that you too will see results when you do it. But you will see your results. Everyone sees their results. So, that being said, Sana, what in closing, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts on this season, I feel like unknowingly we actually had a foundation of themes which intertwined with each other a lot. And I think we had some really, really experienced guests who raised very, very important points. And like I said, some great tips, from financial tips to dating tips to handling yourself in a misfit world and to how to grieve. So many different areas that we touched. And the message that I want to just give out to our listeners is please go back and listen to each of these episodes and see how you want to reinvent the cultural norms that you have to deal with on the daily basis and stay true to your values for each of those things, utilizing the tips that our guests have given.
Right, for sure. And I just want to add to that that we're talking about season 2, but their episodes in season 1 that you may be going through a challenge that those episodes speak to as well. And they're there on, Spotify and Apple and YouTube for you to go back and listen to anything, check out the titles, give us a follow, give us a like, and we want to thank you for listening to them as well. When you go back and listen to them, please do comment and let us know what really resonated with you or how one of our guests shared helped you. Because by writing it down and creating multi-sensory experiences, we actually help our own personal journey and growth.
Yeah. Okay, Rabia, let's talk about the Peace Vigil that we're organizing.
Yes. Well, we are definitely doing our second virtual Peace Vigil on the 22nd of September. And 21st of September is the United Nations International Day of Peace. So that's why we're hosting it on the 22nd, to honor that, but also to promote peace, because as we talked about earlier, there is a real dire need for this world to come together. And I do believe that as we do these events and people show up, they have the space to find people that they relate to, others that want peace too. And
Yes.
so creating that community is really important.
I can't wait for the Peace Vigil. I think it's so needed right now with everything that's going on in the world, and really putting this message out there that more and more of us need to come together in this collective cause for peace. And that goes along with the message of inclusion that we talked about. And that is what we are embodying by organizing this event along with our co-host, Paul. And that's one of our ways of spreading this message of inclusion and acceptance, the differences, belonging, all of that coming together in this event. And I really feel like our purpose speaks volumes. So I can't wait for that.
For sure. And I just wanted to say we're going to be doing an episode on the Peace Vigil as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So
With Paul
McFarlane. And so the three of us will be coming together to talk a little bit about that in a future episode as well. So anything left to share?
For season 3, stay tuned because we have some really hot topics planned.
That's right. And one more thing is that we want to invite more men. We are going to be showing more diversity and inclusion on our podcast by showing both sides, how men are impacted by cultural norms and how women are impacted by cultural norms. And of course, with experts that can share with us tips and tools and tricks of how to overcome these differences and have a happier, healthier life.
Yeah, I can't wait for that also. And so thank you so much, everyone, for watching our season finale. Please go back and listen to the episodes from this season and stay tuned for what's more to come.
It's that time of the episode, Sana.
Yeah. We are two desi girls
Reinventing cultural norms with love. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Please rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow the Rabia and Sana Show on social medias.
Remember, you can watch the video version on YouTube, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.
If you want life coaching services, or you are reinventing cultural norms for yourself and think you would be a great guest and want to be on our show, please email contact@therabiaandsanashow.com.
And be sure to check out our next episode. See you next time.
See you next time.